Hey there, I'm Brian Patrick Flynn. I'm the interior designer of HGTV Dream Home, and this is my own 1965 mid-century-modern dream home in Atlanta, Georgia. And I want to give you a look at some of my favorite spaces and everything I've done since I bought this house about 10 years ago. So come on in and we will start with my entryway. But a lot of people refer to it as my art gallery because it technically is one. So when you first walk in the house, you immediately get a taste of my own personality and my particular taste in art. I don't like one medium. I like photography, I like abstract, I like representational, I like graphic art, I like sculpture, I like found objects, and all of those can be found on any wall in my entryway. This is my first trip 10 years ago to Iceland, and I loved everything about the mood of this photo. So it's one of the first things you see from 3 different spaces within the house. Also, I spent a lot of times in my earlier years going to flea markets and garage sales and estate sales, and I found this. It was actually free at a friend's estate sale, and I loved everything about it so much. It's referred to as a brutalist sculpture. It's from like the mid-1970s, and I even have sentimental things that wouldn't necessarily be art. Like my little nephew who's about to turn 5, he calls me Uncle BB. And I loved it because it was like just this moment in time when he was about 2 years old. So we framed it and added it to the wall. So any direction you look in my entryway, there's just all these stories of places I've been and experiences I've had. And I think that kind of gives people a little bit of a movie trailer as to the person who lives in this house before they make their way around. Let me take you into what we call the great room, which is the most recently remodeled part of the house, which kind of didn't even exist before, but now it's like a multi-purpose space that we use all the time. Professionally, I'm an interior designer, but I am also a production designer, which means I don't just design houses for people, residential spaces, I also design spaces that are meant for entertainment, like sets or vignettes. That really affects how I design my own home because I'm always thinking of how things look through the lens. So how do the colors play? What do the patterns look like? Can I tell by looking at this room what kind of person lives here? And that's the same way that I decorate and design houses for myself and for real people. When we remodeled this in 2020, the plan was we'd been home for a good 5 or 6 months and we wanted the feeling, this is very specific, of what it would be like to live in a modern treehouse. What we did was opened everything up, did everything bright white, not only the walls and the ceilings, but the floors as well. And I say that apprehensively because white floors are maybe not the most practical thing in the world, but for somebody who is totally inspired by natural light, they're the perfect choice because they bounce light around the whole entire house and everything seems very bright and happy all the time. One of the things that I try to do in almost every space I design is have a conversation starter. My artist friend who lives in Charleston, South Carolina, Sam, she creates original pieces of art out of felt. And she cuts them free-handedly into all different shapes and sizes and people. And because I'm such a music person, I love the idea of having this kind of like motley crew of different iconic musicians from all these different decades. Right off my studio space is the cocktail lounge. My favorite things as far as interior design are concerned are interior architecture. I love custom upholstery and I also love lighting. So this is the perfect example of a room that does all 3 of those things. I always wanted the feeling of having kind of like a 1960s or early 1970s nightclub in my own house. The best way to use the space was to create a built-in banquette that's U-shaped. And although it's white, people see it and they're like, that is so impractical. This is performance fabric. So this is indoor, outdoor, and everything wipes right off of it. It will never be perfectly pristine white the way it was when I first had it made, but it holds up pretty well. The other thing that I love about this is the gigantic disco ball. It's not that easy to find something this big, but I found my 42-inch disco ball at a party rental company in New Jersey. You never know where you're gonna find the things you're looking for. Just above my head is one of the coolest pieces of art you're gonna find in my house. This is a neon sign. When it lights up, it's bright aqua. And it's lyrics from this song that a friend of mine wrote that kind of compares life to what it's like remodeling a house or restoring an old, beautiful architectural gem. And so I took some of the lyrics and turned them into the sign because I love the idea that people know music is always gonna be on in my house and there's a disco ball right above, there's usually cocktails going, and this truly does feel like you've been transported to a nightclub even though you're in the center of my house. I was planning on doing a custom coffee table in here because there's so much space to fill inside of the U-shaped banquette. I was at a flea market and they had this. I could not believe the price. It wasn't very expensive, and it was 50 inches by 50 inches, which fills this space perfectly. And I kept thinking, I want clear because I love my rugs so much. My friend Meredith, who lives in Toronto, made this from scratch, and the idea was it was supposed to look like fragmented icebergs because I love the polar regions. So it was a match made in heaven because it's big, it holds everything I need it to hold, and I can see right through it to the rug. So this came home with me that same day, even though I did not have a car that could accommodate it. We found one by the end of the day. Similar to the way that I've delineated the cocktail lounge from the workspace, I've done the same thing over here with my TV room. And the thing that I love about using these divider screens is they allow the light to totally pass through without making a space darker, but at the same time, they add just a little bit of privacy. And this is the perfect example of why I like the privacy. One of my hangups as an interior designer is I love a TV in almost every room in the house, but I don't like TVs in rooms where I want people to come over and talk and have conversations. I think TVs should not necessarily be super visible. So this is my TV room. It has a 22-foot long L-shaped banquette, and it took me about 8 months to have this made because the company that I worked with wanted to make sure the pitch was exactly what I wanted for my height, which is 6'5". It's very hard to find a sofa for somebody who's 6'5" like me. After months and months of going back and forth to have this custom made, everything about it was selected. And the thing that really stood out to me about the actual fabric is this is a wool boucle. It is so classically mid-century modern because it has this very rough, nubby texture to it. When I first saw this fabric and I knew that it came in forest green, I was like, that's perfect. We've incorporated all these USB and outlets into the base of the banquette. It was absolutely the most expensive thing in the entire house, but it's worth it because there's plenty of room to just kick back and watch TV, and nobody else ever sees the TV except for us. We have a gigantic, industrial, oversized fan above us, and another thing you'll see in almost every room in the house here is the use of skylights. Luckily, we have skylights that open and close so we can ventilate, so during the harsh summers here in Georgia, we don't have to worry about being too hot. This room is also a lot less colorful, mostly because we're up here in the trees. We feel like we're nestled into the woods, and everything outside the window is either brown, gray, or green, so everything inside the room is the same as well. When people come over and they're like, why are there so many iceberg-oriented things in your house? I got married in 2017 in Antarctica. I'm not kidding. I legitimately made it all the way to the bottom of the planet where like nobody ever goes. It was the most magical experience ever. And when I got married, I have an artist friend who lives in Nashville, and she uses mixed media. And she made this gigantic 7.5-foot by 4-foot mixed media piece of one of our favorite icebergs we saw in this area called the Lemaire Channel in Antarctica. Almost anywhere you look in the house, there's some type of nod back to our experience in Antarctica, whether it's color, or whether it's art or texture. So the most recently completed space in the entire house is the opposite of an adult space to watch TV. It is a nursery because I'm expecting my first baby, a daughter, in about a week. So we just completed it, and you will be the first people to ever see this space. It took me a long time to get my head around what direction I wanted to go. I never realized how hard it is to narrow down your selections as an interior designer when you're doing your own house. I wanted a nod to a little Nordic explorer. I didn't want anything that had been done a million times before, so a friend of mine designed this wallpaper with me from scratch. So the whole idea is we have a little Nordic explorer, and she's out with her backpack and her teddy bear, and she is exploring all the Nordic countries. So when we have a little baby in the crib, she can see herself and all her little animal friends. I would say the hardest thing about designing my own home as an interior designer is there's too many options. I get hired by people to narrow down choices to 3 or 4 for every single aspect of the design process. I don't have anybody filtering that for me. Plus, I see every single thing that's out there at all the design centers, so it's like sensory overload. There's just too many options. And when you're doing every single room in your house and you're in charge of the budget and the timeline, the sky's the limit, which sounds fun, but in reality, I just need somebody else to help reel me in. And a lot of times that has to be me, which is not the easiest task. I had to get really clever with the budget. And when I was looking at gliders, I immediately went towards the gliders that are impractical from a price standpoint, and you're only gonna use it for 2 years. So investing thousands of dollars on a glider is not really the best use of your money. I was consistently going back to this particular glider, but I did not like the fabric it came in, so I kept skipping over it. And then I had an idea, wait,
that glider is the most affordable one online. So I just bought it. Then I went and found this performance fabric that's in my favorite shade of green, which is pine needle or forest green. Had it recovered, and then also brought a little bit of a custom touch in with this welt cord, which is bubblegum pink. So for a fraction of what it would have cost to have something made custom, I bought something affordably and just had it reupholstered. The one part of the room where I splurged, and I knew I was always going to, was gonna be the crib. I fell in love with the overall look of this about 2 or 3 years ago before we even know we were expecting our first baby. What I love the most about it is the unique architecture of the crib. It has this beautiful X detail on each side, and then the crib itself is pure white. And because we're naming our daughter Clover, and I love the idea of it being very Irish and Irish stuff being green, we could do any color we wanted because it was custom made, and it's just a little nod to her name. So this was where the majority of the decorating budget went. Aside from the room just being super playful and being custom to our own daughter, I wanted to make sure it fit the vernacular and also the architecture. So there are a few nods to mid-century modernism here. We have a chrome mushroom lamp, which is super 60s and 70s. And also we have this really modern slatted ceiling. This is something my carpenter Michael did a few years ago, and I knew I wanted to add some architecture to a room that was otherwise just a rectangle with absolutely no character. And I think the lamp mixed with the ceiling and the incredible hardware that you see on the doors, those are starbursts from the 1960s. So I think those 3 little hints of mid-century really make this room appropriate for this house. There are so many touches in there that are so personal, and I'm really proud of it. It's kind of my dream nursery, but it's definitely not something that would have been requested by one of my clients. It's actually true and original specifically for my child, and that's what makes me love it even more. This is the space that we refer to as our family room, and it is towards the front of the house, and it's what connects the entryway to the kitchen. And it was kind of hard to design because it is kind of a pass-through space. So I had to get really clever with the way that we added the seating. So these are remarkably low modular seating pieces. We added 3 on each side. They create about 13 feet of seating space. And they're super low, which was amazingly helpful because one of the most expensive things in the entire remodel was investing in the steel windows and the steel doors. Because these are such a feature from the outdoors, if I had tall furniture, you'd be looking at the back of furniture from outside. A lot of times people fall asleep in this room, which is a huge compliment as an interior designer, because a lot of times when you live in a very mid-century modern home, people can find them so modern that they're cold, they're impersonal. But this house is so personalized that I think people feel really warm when they walk in. And the family room is always gonna be the place that gets the most traffic. This is the space that we as a family unit will spend the most time. So I wanted to create a really beautiful focal point with one of my least favorite things in the interior design world, and that is a corner fireplace. Corner fireplaces make it really hard as a designer or a decorator to create a space plan for furniture around because it's awkward. There's a door on this side, there's a window over here, but what I wanted to do is give it some personality. So if you look, this is very mid-century modern. These are matte and they all have different colors, and they were placed randomly with no grout, so it just has this really nice, imperfectly perfect look. And we went with a frame TV because when we don't have cartoons playing or children's programming on, we can put up our favorite piece of art here and it just looks like a framed piece of art. It's directly in the corner of where the kitchen meets the family room. Now, this actually is not my dream kitchen. This is a kitchen that has been more practical than anything else because when we bought the house, it was very dark and very low. The ceilings only came to about 8 feet. I had all this space to play with, and we added a skylight, we added all these steel windows, because I wanted the kitchen to also feel kind of treehouse-like. These are seamless cabinet fronts because I wanted this to be super minimal. We are open to totally changing this again, but right now it's working for us. It's just so minimal that when people come over, they're like, excuse me, sir, how do I open these cabinets? So this may look a lot different in about 2 or 3 years. I'm a very flexible designer. I like things to kind of move as I grow and change and my tastes evolve. But I would say when it comes to interior architecture, that's where I set things in stone to stay, to honor the overall vibe of the house. So there are some things in the house that are permanent, that are not moving, but they're more architectural and structural rather than decorative. The most used spot in the kitchen is the breakfast nook, which is towards the back of the house, all mid-century furniture, mid-century lighting. This is a space that is sure going to see probably the most family time aside from the actual family room. And I think we're pretty set up here in the breakfast nook too. We've already got our high chair. In fact, the high chair has been here longer than these chairs have because we've been so excited about this new change in life that we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. As the designer of the HGTV Dream Home, I often feel a lot of pressure to get everything perfect because I've got hundreds of millions of eyes looking at the projects that I do for work. So I assume people will think anything that I'm doing for my own private clients or myself is gonna obviously be Dream Home caliber. And there's a lot of pressure to do that, but it's also my own home. You know, I'm not designing it for somebody to enter for a chance to win. I'm designing it for me and my family. So there's a lot of pride in that.
If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Handmade for more tours like this.